we are going to dive into an incredibly important all-season topic, and that is the cuts that the Titans will inevitably have to make to have as much cap space as they need to kind of reform the roster as they do year to year. To help us do that, we have the esteemed Will Lomas back on the show. I've had him on before to, talk different topics. He's one of the better Titans content creators out there, writing articles on Fansided for the Titan-sized page, has his podcast with Luke Warsham and those folks, the No Nonsense Pod. So check out his content as well. But he put out a very good article recently on Titan-sized, going over 6 Tennessee Titans that could see the axe for salary cap reasons. And I brought Will on so that we can kind of just go through these different candidates and see what we could do if the Titans do cut them, what options they have to replace them in the lineup, all those different conversations. So first and foremost, Will, thanks for coming on, and how are you doing this evening?
Yeah, I'm great. I'm glad to be on. So you said esteemed earlier, which seems like high praise. I'm just glad I did well enough to get invited back.
Yeah, most certainly that. But one of the big reasons, obviously, the big reason I had you on is because you wrote this excellent article going over who I think are the obvious 6 candidates that could be cut for the Titans, and we're going to dive into two. Starting off here, the conversation, and 2 names that are not only the biggest names that are on the chopping block, but they also have the biggest salaries and the biggest ability to create cap space for the Titans. And they're both on the left side of the offensive line. We have left tackle Taylor Lewan and left guard Roger Saffold. So diving into Taylor Lewan first. So you look at Taylor Lewan. If the Titans decide to part ways with Taylor Lewan and they decide to cut Taylor Lewan, they're going to find themselves with $12.9, so nearly $13 million of extra cap space. I know a lot of people were kind of upset with the way that Taylor Lewan played at times last year. He was coming off the ACL. Where do you stand? And if you were running the Titans, Will, since you did write this excellent article, what would you do with Taylor Lewan? Would you cut him and save that space, or do you think that you would keep him on board? Because as you pointed out in your article, he'd be about the 14th highest paid offensive tackle or left tackle in the NFL, which seems about right for where his skill level is at this time.
Yeah, that's the question, right? So with Lewan, everybody screams about him being overpaid, and they have since he signed his deal. Whether it's right or wrong, even when he was playing well and he was a Pro Bowl
I think it's
player,
wrong, personally. I think
yeah,
he's
like
properly paid.
yeah, like when he was a Pro Bowl tackle, people were still complaining and saying that he was the highest paid offensive tackle when that wasn't true. Like people have this perception that because he got such a big deal and because the Titans weren't signing those big deals at the time, that he's got this exorbitant fee that just doesn't make any sense. And he's making what, 14 million, and like only like 1.3 of that's guaranteed. And so, I mean, he's got a really manageable, nice mid-level contract. Like this is what these are the years where you should be able to enjoy the contract because you pay over market value early so that you don't have to late. The problem is, like, everybody, right or wrong, like you said, I think wrong too. Everybody blames 5 sacks on from the Cardinals, which he only allowed 2, but they all blame that on him. Anytime there's pass protection, they just point out the high paid left tackle when it's generally not his fault. And so you get all this blame because he's so vocal and he's such a big presence that everybody wants to talk about his podcast, all that stuff. At the end of the day, paying him like the 14th highest paid left tackle is good. Like in a vacuum, if they didn't need money, that's a good deal. The problem is you've got Dylan Radin sitting on the bench. You saw him in one game with no preparation against one of the best pass rushers in the league, and he shut him out so much. Not that it was perfect, obviously. We've talked about that before. But he did an effective enough job, especially compared to the rest of the offensive tackles in the NFL, to where he moved to the other side because it was easier to play against Questenberry than it was against Radins. So you have positive information there. You knew that Radins was going to need a year of development in a non-FCS weightlifting program just to compete at this level. He's widely regarded as one of the hardest working offensive linemen, if not players, on the team. He gets rave reviews from everybody in that category. So you've got a guy who he's played left tackle his entire career. That's what he did in college. I like he's done that forever. He did it his one start in the NFL. He looked good there. Do you want to go ahead and move him to the right side and mess up what little continuity you have with him, even though you've played him at guard spots just for no reason the whole time? So to me, if there wasn't a ready-made player, in Dylan Radins right behind him, who I think can do what Lewan did last year, then no, you don't cut Lewan. But man, like he's going to be 31. He's, again, this next year should be his best year. Like, I mean, he's should be fully recovered from the ACL injury. Like he should be a full, he should be motivated, all that kind of stuff, and that's
Right.
great. It's at right tackle. I'd have no qualms with it. The problem is, man, if you had $13 million and, we'll talk about some more cuts they can make later, but if you cut him and somebody else and you have $20 million sitting on your books and you can just go sign Allen Robinson to be like the wide receiver 2 on this offense, or if you can sign Michael Gallup or, one of those other really talented wide receivers, it would make life so much easier in the draft where you weren't pigeonholed into a certain position. So, I still would not, but I'm having a harder and harder time faulting the front office if they do.
Yeah, I understand that, and I'll kind of piggyback off that and tell you why I think they can't. I think a restructure could be on the table for Taylor Lewan. Obviously, that's a possibility, but I just don't think that you can go into next year with 2 brand new tackles. John Robinson has talked about how important offensive tackle is in his system, and while I understand that Taylor Lewan is getting, paid a good, they could save a good chunk of money. Is basically the whole point here. To me, you can't go in with 2 brand new tackles next year in the last year of the window with this core. You wait 1 year and then there's no dead money if you cut Taylor Lewan. You get 2 years for Dylan Radins to kind of get ready to go. I can see sliding Radins in at right tackle, then moving him over to left tackle in 2023's season. I think I would do that. And also, like you mentioned, coming off the ACL, it's pretty much proven that guys play much better the second year after that ACL happened. Lewan just had that first year coming back, and he was clearly physically not ready to go in that game 1 and at the beginning of the season. So for me, I just think it's too much upheaval because I do expect them to cut the next guy we're going to talk about, which is guard Roger Saffold. Saffold struggled throughout the year with injury and neck injury, upper body injury for an offensive line with all the punch in and everything that's required from your upper body when blocking. I think that's pretty tough to come back from. Even when Saffold was out there, he struggled at times, especially in pass protection this year. And I think when you have Aaron Brewer, you have Dylan Radins. John Robinson has shown that he can find interior offensive linemen. It's one of his sweet spots where he finds some good guys. I just don't think that when you cut Roger Saffold, probably not going to have Questenberry starting at right tackle. You can't also double down on that and not have Taylor Lewan at left tackle while also having Ben Jones going into free agency. I get the offensive line needs to be remade in a way, but I think that's a little bit too much. So I would try to restructure Lewan, or at minimum just keep him around because, like you said, he's like the 14th highest paid left tackle, and for his skill, I think that's fair. That's what you're going to pay for a left tackle, and I would worry that if they cut Lewan and Saffold, they would have to go into free agency at that point to fill one of those spots and get a veteran. And I just don't think that I want to see them go there. So with Saffold, I think that's an easy cut. It would save the Titans $10.4 million on the cap. They could slide in Aaron Brewer. They could slide in Dylan Radins, although I don't think that Radins is a guard. I think we're in, decent agreement there. So I guess with me saying what I would do with Roger Saffold and my reasoning, do you agree with that, or what are your thoughts there?
So I think, I think you're dead on about Saffold. So my only concern is, assuming you cut Saffold, you're going to be starting Brewer there, unless something crazy happens and they say, no, we want you at center and we're going to draft a guard, or they draft Zion
Mhm.
Johnson and just say, okay, we're going to figure out which
Right.
one of you plays where. But
Mhm.
assuming that it's going to be Brewer, I mean, they're going to have to get that offensive line continuity and chemistry all over again anyway. And then you go into 2023 and you're going to have to do it again if Lewan's not your answer at left tackle. So to me, I almost view this as Saffold's gone either way, but if they
Yeah.
decide not to re-sign Ben Jones, which it depends on what he's going to want because they love him there. But if they decide, we just can't afford you, you're going to get a 1 year, $12 million deal somewhere, whatever, then I mean, just rip the band-aid off. Like, I mean, Quessenberry is a restricted free agent. Let him go. Cut Lewan, cut Saffold.
Mhm.
Just remake your entire offensive line, and not you don't have to do exactly what the Chiefs did, but they had a vision for what they wanted their offensive line to be. Don't
True.
say, okay, well, we're not going to run as much zone scheme stuff, but I still want to keep our zone scheme tackle and our zone scheme guard, and we're going to place them with
Right.
a gap scheme center and a gap scheme right tackle. It's like, no, it's like if you're going to rip that band-aid off and whether it's Kelly's vision or Downing's or just Robinson saying these are the best options we have, make this work, whatever it
Mhm.
is, like if you're going to replace 4 starters, you can remake your offensive line with an identity that you want, and you don't have to kind of piecemeal it together.
Yeah.
So Saffold, I think, is gone for sure.
Mhm.
But just the long-term vision of the offensive line will have to deal with, like, really Ben Jones feels like the swing guy. Like, if he's not
Yeah.
coming back, you're losing continuity so many places.
Yes, I agree with you there. Ben Jones, if they bring Ben Jones back, then I think that, yes, you try to keep it together and just piece in certain spots like right tackle and left guard. But you're right. If Ben Jones goes elsewhere, then maybe it is time to completely overhaul it in a serious way, including cutting Taylor Lewan and Roger Saffold.